Hello, my beauties and bees, and welcome once again to another installment of Cryptic Corner, where we explore the unexplained, the supernatural, the paranormal and hidden, the mysterious, the alien, the accursed, and forbidden. I am your host, the Bride of Mothman, also known as Bumblebee, and this is my final form. So I am a moth person now. Surprise! I came out of my cocoon. I was a moth person this whole time. Now, this was a Christmas present, so I'm gonna wear it for Cryptic Corner today because I love it and it's cozy and warm and cute. So Mothman is definitely the cryptid of Christmas. The Silver Bridge collapsed on was it Christmas Eve? Right before Christmas. There were the imagery is always Christmas presents floating down the river. So we're not talking about Mothman today, but I just wanted to let you guys know that Mothman is the official cryptid of Christmas. So if there's any doubt about which cryptid to celebrate, I mean the abominable snowman is the Christmas cryptid too, or Christmas cryptid. Thank you. You always look adorable too, Maya. But, yeah, because of Rudolph, that's why the Bumble Snowman is, that's actually my name, Bumblebee, so, yeah. But today, we're going to be talking about a cryptid, not necessarily associated with Christmas, but I thought it pertinent to cover it, and I thought it was an interesting topic. Christmas, there you go, Christmas, I love that. Christmas cryptid. All right, so we are going to be exploring what's called the Minnesota Iceman. Now, if you're not familiar with this, it is a piece of American folklore from the days of carnival barking. So let's lay it out. Let me know how the audio is too. It kind of jumps up and down. That's a little loud. Let me bring us both down. There we go. That should be about right. Yeah. Yep.
Welcome back to Remote Cabin Radio for another eerie exploration into the unknown. Tonight's story takes us on a journey into the tangled web of cryptozoological mysteries that span decades, where fact and fiction blur and the line between science and spectacle fades. What you're about to hear is the first-hand account of Frank Hansen, the man at the center of...
Oh, good old Frank Hansen. I want to be clear that I don't believe a damn thing that Frank Hansen has ever said about this subject. Just to get right out of the gate, I'm going to put that out there, but we're going to give his story a good once over. I'm actually going to speed it up a little bit though, because we are on a schedule
of one of the most hotly debated controversies in modern cryptid lore. The story was first published in 1969 in Saga magazine, where Hansen recounts his astonishing claim: the capture and killing of what some believe to be the infamous ape man, a creature that could be a missing link in the evolutionary chain or an elaborate hoax. Over the years, this specimen has sparked a whirlwind of intrigue, skepticism, and legal entanglements. Governments, scientists...
Ooh, I like that Simply Secular, Dave. I'm going to try that. The Minnesota Iceman. I thought a Minnesota Iceman would be a good drink name. We need somebody from Minnesota to come up with the name for it, though. So who do I know from Minnesota? Isn't Jenny Morgan's in Minnesota? Purple's in Minnesota, too, I think. Y'all come up with a drink called the Minnesota Iceman. Make it something good. Make it yummy. Ooh, maybe make it creamy. I like creamy drinks.
And carnival showmen have all taken part in the drama. Was this creature the key to unlocking one of humanity's greatest mysteries? Or was it simply the product of a skilled showman's hand? Now, here is the unabridged telling, in Frank Hansen's own words: I killed the ape-man creature of Whiteface. When
you hear the xylophone go, you know it's about to get tense.
For years, the thing has been exhibited in carnival sideshows and state fairs around the US and in Canada. For years, the monster has been the subject of a bitter feud between it, owner, and government agencies. For years, the specimen has fueled a raging battle among scientists. Is it an incredible hoax or a fantastic anthropological find?
No, your carnival attraction did not fuel raging. Other than the fact that maybe you had a dead animal or a dead body as a circus attraction, that might be a problem. But I don't think anybody ever believed that you were keeping a frozen caveman or Sasquatch or whatever, because they had a few different identities. They said it was a Neanderthal. They said there's lore that it was discovered bobbing in the Bering Strait off Alaska. It gets pretty, this gets pretty, wow.
Now, for the first time anywhere, the man responsible for the biggest controversy to hit the scientific world in the past decade presents his own story to the public and leaves it to the reader to decide if it's fact or fiction. Is the creature a fabrication, a product of a vivid imagination, expert craftsmanship, and a showman's flair for illusion? Or is it really a flesh and blood clue to the development of the family of man? Wanted, dead, or alive, the abominable snowman, also known as Yeti, Omar, Almasty, Sasquatch, and other aliases. The fugitive is a two-footed mammal, known scientifically as Homo pongoides, or ape-like man. Suspect has been identified as a missing link between the ape and modern man. Eyewitnesses have reported that he closely resembles the Neanderthal species of subhuman. Suspect is described as follows: height, 6 to 9 feet. Weight, 250 to 800 pounds. Complexion, wind-burned and ruddy. Dress, suspect's body is covered with 1-inch-long reddish-brown hair, except for portions of the face, hands, and feet. He has been seen in the Himalayan mountains, in Russia, the United States, and Canada. If some persistent hunter should capture such a creature, we might expect that fame, fortune, and a footnote in scientific history would be his reward. The enigma of the missing link has plagued scientists of the Darwinian theory for many years. The actual body of an ape-man specimen would end this controversy and prove...
Robert, the link for all the shows should be on the list if you're watching this through the marathon link, which I hope everybody is, so that it bounces you on to the next person. So if you're not watching this through the marathon link, there's when BugBot drops the marathon link, click on that. It'll reset this stream. It'll put you right back to where we were, but it'll put you in the marathon. And then the transpositions one is like 3 streams down, and that's where we're doing the call-in show. And the link's there if you want to plug that. But yes, that's Robin. That's when we're doing that. So also, yeah, I'm doing another show later this evening with Stephanie and maybe Ember. I'm not sure if Ember was wanting to participate or not, but we're doing a call-in show. Yes, Transpositions call-in show. It's a Transpositions call-in show. Absolutely. I am considering doing a cryptid call-in show because I had so much fun doing the cryptid call-in show the other day, but I don't know if I could cultivate an audience, and I know it's difficult to chase down an audience or chase down callers for that based on, when I was doing it with Ethan when we did the perspective.
Prove the existence of the abominable snowman. The rewards should be considerable. Through pure chance and random circumstance, I obtained the body of such a creature. 2 world-renowned scientists examined the corpse and declared it was a genuine ape-man creature, scientifically identified as Homo pongoides. Belgian scientist Bernard Hovelmans declared, for the first time in history, a fresh corpse of a Neanderthal-like man has been found. It means that this form of hominid, thought to be extinct since prehistoric times, is still living today. The long search for rumored ape-men, or missing links, has been successful. Hovelman's associate, author and scientist Evan Sanderson, reported in a national magazine that the creature was the genuine article. This was no phony Chinese trick or artwork. When the newspapers published articles on my specimen...
I think the notion was that at least from what I understand of Hovelman, is that he thought it was definitely an authentic dead body. At least the original one was. But it gets pretty deep, so...
I was astonished and then concerned to discover the creature was labeled a hoax by the prestigious Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. To my knowledge, no member of the Smithsonian scientific staff has ever examined the specimen described by Dr. Hovelmans and Ivan Sanderson. I became extremely nervous when the newspapers in both the US and England pointed out that if this creature is real, then there may be the question of how and why it was killed.
Well, yeah, Chinese trick. The reason they say that is because there was the idea that it was a fished out of the ocean by Chinese fishermen or Japanese fishermen, maybe. I don't know. The folklore gets kind of murky. Because this Hansen guy, Frank Hansen, he changed the story every time he retold it, depending on who he was talking to. There's a conference that I listened to last night before bed, actually, where this Collins guy was explaining his experience working with, trying to work with Hansen.
My fears led me to an attorney and personal friend who explained the possibility of a murder charge. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and hordes of lesser law enforcement officials revealed a sudden, ominous interest in my specimen. On one occasion, I had to ask my U.S. Senator for his help to get me out of an untenable situation with the Bureau of Customs and the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. My dreams of recognition from the scientific community have vanished. My attorney adequately summed up the situation one morning. Frank, if you're not careful, you'll end up in a prison cell. Now, for the first time, I want the full story on this creature to be published. I have not asked for and will not receive a single cent from Saga magazine. My main desire is to eliminate much of the supposition and conjecture about a story that has become the biggest controversy in the scientific world in the past decade.
Has it, though? Or is that what you wanted people to think to sell tickets? Is that... I mean... I think it doesn't have to be one or the other, but... I don't think anybody took this seriously scientifically. As you can see, the Smithsonian just dismissed it off the cuff because it was a carnival attraction. But, oh, hey, Nikki. Good to see ya. Merry Christmas. Hope you had a good morning.
Start at the beginning. In 1960, I was an Air Force captain and pilot assigned to the 343rd Fighter Group in Duluth, Minnesota. I had 5 years to go until my retirement as a 20-year Air Force career officer and was looking forward to a quiet life on a small farm somewhere in southern Minnesota. I enjoyed being stationed in Duluth, as the hunting and fishing in northern Minnesota is the best in the world.
All right.
During the 1960s...
Map time! Y'all know I can't resist diving into a map when one presents itself. So let's look at this Whiteface Reserve, where we can't get real close. We can get kind of close, though. So there's Rush Lake that kind of is very prominent in the reserve. There's some other unmarked bodies of water as well. It's very marshy, very swampy habitat. And you can't get real close to it, but we can get down here to see kind of what sort of environment we're looking at. So we can drop our little guy down and kind of look at what's around. So as you can see, it's a real forested, but there's a lot of low-lying areas as well where it's marshy, and like in the winter you can see there's bodies of water in these bare patches. Like right here, there's a body of water. This is the route to get to the lake. So presumably somewhere around this area is where our story takes place. Somewhere along this route here. Presumably. Without any further details, there's a lot of trackways that run down through here that it could have come from. Just Comstock coming down through the valley here. But we'll see what happens in the story. Let's do this.
Deer hunting season, I was staying in a small resort on the shores of the Whiteface Reservoir, approximately 60 miles north of Duluth. Roy Arfett and Dave Allison and Lou Srott were the other members of the hunting party. We left the cabin a few minutes after 6 on the second morning, and although I had not spotted a deer on the opening day, I was confident that a narrow neck of swamp where I had hunted was one of the best locations in the area. I sat motionless on a hillside overlooking this pine-crested thicket for almost 2 hours. I was about to leave for another location when a movement at the edge of the swamp caught my eye. My pulse quickened as I thumbed for the safety catch on my customized 8mm Mauser. A large doe, partially obscured by a cedar tree, was staring directly at me. Suddenly, a shot echoed from the other side of the swamp. With one frightened leap, the doe dashed out of the thicket and headed straight toward me. I raised my gun into firing position just as she spotted me. Making 3 great leaps broadside, she scrambled back toward the swamp. I fired just as she reached the edge of the trees, and she fell, headlong, onto the ground. I bolted my rifle end, tried to get off another shot, but she was up and out of sight into the heavy brush before I could take aim. I walked toward the thicket, where I located large spots of blood on the frozen grass. I also discovered that the wounded doe had left a clear trail that led straight into the swamp. There was no snow on the ground, and my borrowed compass proved useless. It was against my better judgment, but I decided to follow the trail for a short distance into the swamp. I pushed slowly along, following the doe's bloody trail.
My dude, you should, if you were out hunting the deer, you should have been, psychologically prepared to have to trudge into the swamp after it. I'm just speculating why these stories get kind of silly.
Expecting her to be lying just beyond the next bush. After an hour, however, I realized that it would be impossible to pack the deer out even if I did find her. I checked my bearings and decided to take just a few more steps before retracing my trail out of the swamp. Stepping over a small cedar log, I heard a strange gurgling sound just ahead. Startled, I raised my gun and listened to the noise for a moment, concluding that the deer went down and strangled in her own blood. Cautiously, I eased my way toward the sound. Suddenly, I froze in horror. In the middle of a small clearing were 3 hairy creatures that at first looked like bears. 2 of these creatures were on their knees, tearing at the insides of a freshly killed deer. The deer's innards were scattered around the clearing, and the things were scooping blood from the stomach cavity into the palms of their human-like hands.
So they're eating blood. Merry Christmas. That's what you want to walk in on, and the blood drinking Sasquatch. But he never did clarify whether that was his doe or not. I'm assuming it was.
Raising their cupped hands of fresh blood to their mouths, they swallowed the liquid. The third creature was about 10 feet away, on the edge of the clearing, crouched on his haunches. It was obvious that he was a male of similar stature as a man. Absolute horror gripped every muscle of my body as I stared at this frightening tableau before me. I felt as if my body had turned to stone. Without warning, the male leaped straight into the air from its crouched position. His arms jerked upward, high over his head, and he let out a weird screeching sound. Screeching and screaming, he charged toward me. I cannot remember aiming my rifle, nor do I recall pulling the trigger, but a bullet must have slammed into the beast's body. As blood spurted from his face, the huge creature staggered, seemingly stunned by this unexpected happening. I do not recall ejecting my spent shell, nor do I recall
So, some homeless people were poaching your deer and you shot the guy in the face. Is that I mean, that's what the story sounds like right now, right? Because he keeps saying, doesn't say, oh, it's a Bigfoot or anything. He's like, it's a man. It's some kind of weird, hairy man.
Firing my rifle again. In many sweat-drenched nightmares, however, I have vividly envisioned the blood-covered face lying on the ground beside the mutilated deer. I have absolutely no recollection of ever seeing the other 2 creatures again. They seem to have vanished into thin air. Blind with fear, I started to run. I dashed over the swampy terrain, not knowing or caring in which direction I ran. My only thought was to get away from those horrible things. I stumbled, fell, picked myself up, and...
See, he doesn't ever call them, Bigfoot or anything. He's always like those things, the hairy men. Sometimes he calls them Neanderthals or cavemen or ape men, but he never calls it like a Bigfoot or anything like that.
fell again. I thought they were right behind me. Finally, I fell onto the frozen marshland, completely exhausted, not caring if the creatures caught me. I lay there waiting for the attack. I have no recollection of time, and perhaps my mind blanked out. When I regained composure, there was only the natural silence of the swampland. I wondered if I hadn't fallen asleep and dreamed the whole thing. Regardless, I knew I must find my way out of the swamp. My compass, which I had borrowed from Major Schrott, was next to worthless.
Yeah, isn't that nice, Brian? He's like, I don't remember anything, but it happened like this. I blacked out and woke up and don't recall any of what happened. But this is what happened.
I raised my rifle and fired the 3 rapid shots that signal a hunter is in trouble. Nothing happened. I reloaded my rifle.
Oh, dude was a showman. Frank Hansen's he was making hundreds of thousands of dollars with this exhibit, right? He was like a P.T. Barnum character.
And fired again. This time, returning shots echoed in the distance. I moved in the direction of the shots, but stopped periodically and listened intently for some familiar sound. After traveling a considerable distance, I finally heard someone calling to me. Traveling in the direction of the voice, I finally emerged onto a hilly clearing and saw a group of hunters standing around their camp. I approached and, hiding my fright, explained that I had become lost from my hunting party that morning. 2 of the hunters seemed to know where our green pickup was parked and volunteered to drive me back in their automobile. It was past noon when we arrived back at our parked truck. Lou and the boys were waiting. I threw the compass at Lou. That compass isn't worth a cent, I complained. You're just the great white hunter who got lost.
Yeah, tale of overcome by swamp gas. Yeah, I think maybe he was went off on his own to fire one up, you know.
Someone chuckled, chiding me for my lack of wood lore. On several occasions that day, I started to mention my harrowing experience to my companions. I wanted to confide in someone, but how could I? Military retirement was less than 5 years away. I might lose everything if the story got out. The fight surgeon might even believe I was mentally unstable and unfit for flying.
Say you were hunting and someone tried to poach you, or you caught someone poaching your deer, and they before you could even say anything, they charged at you, and you opened fire to defend yourself. It does not sound like you're going to get, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure someone might try to, and they might try to prosecute you if there's evidence of what you say isn't true. Which, again, this is Frank Hansen, so what he says is probably not true. But the story isn't too bad. Does not paint you in a bad light if you told it this way.
Duty. I could be forced out of the Air Force on a medical discharge. My mind reeled with the possibilities. If I returned to the swamp, what would it prove? Had I killed the creature? Was it an escaped gorilla? Or was it a man dressed up for some deer hunting prank? Except for being completely hair covered.
Oh, I don't remember that episode. You can hallucinate from eating venomous snakes? Or do you do like Coyote Peterson and totally exaggerate the effects of things that you consume in the wildlife for theatrics? That's so annoying when Coyote Peterson does that, because he's teaching kids and stuff that, oh yeah, any bug that can sting is going to send you into convulsions. You're going to be rolling on the ground screaming, and it's just not the case. And it's making people like more frightened of wildlife than they need to be.
The thing seemed to have every feature of a human being. What about the two creatures that had disappeared? Or had the whole thing been the product of my imagination? Everything was unreal and totally incomprehensible. Our hunting party returned home, and I spent a month...
Right, and I think you said it was in the snow, too.
...wrestling with my conscience. I had been troubled with migraine headaches several years previously, and now they returned with a pounding intensity. I swallowed dozens of pills each day. As both an instructor and instrument check pilot, I always flew.
Right, Mark? Yeah, it's a good old prank, Nothing like pranking military veterans in the woods with guns by pretending to be the animals while they're out there hunting animals.
As aircraft commander, I often had a pilot who was neither current nor checked out for the particular aircraft we were flying, so I avoided airtime, except for a single...
Well, so Les Stroud was on Bob Gimlin earlier this week or last week, talking about his Bigfoot experiences in the forest, and I'm kind of about it, but watch it and let me know what you guys think too. Not now, don't go there now, but yeah, Bob Gimlin's interview with Survivor Man.
4-hour flight near the end of the month. I knew it was impossible to continue to fly.
I wasn't impressed
until the mystery of my experience in the swamp had been resolved.
Wait a second, what I missed there?
To fly until for a single 4-hour flight near the end particular aircraft we were flying, so I avoided airtime, except for a single 4-hour flight near the end of the month. I knew it was impossible to continue to fly until the mystery of my experience in the swamp had been resolved. I watched the weather closely, waiting for a heavy snow, which would provide good tracking conditions. I would not consider going into that swamp again without being able to backtrack in my own footsteps. On the 29th of November, it happened.
Well, you can make marks. You can make your own tracks, right? You can make your own traceable tracks to find your way back. It's possible to do that. There's actually different ways you can stack stones to even send different messages. Like if you get lost, right? If you know the right way to stack the stones to say, hey, I went this way, I'm going to do this, whatever. There's trail marker signs that you can leave. I'm not saying I know a whole bunch of them or anything, but...
The weather reported 5 inches of fresh snow in the Whiteface area on Friday, December 2nd.
Who the hell waits for 5 inches of snow to go hiking in the woods? Is that like a realistic thing? So you know what? I want to go into the swamp, but I want to wait till there's 5 inches of snow on the ground.
A warm front moved in, and the snow was slowly melting, making ideal tracking conditions. By now, I had formed a plan. The following day, I took...
a melty swamp. A swamp covered with snow and over thin ice over a swamp. This is the perfect time to go out searching for wild men in said swamp.
My automatic shotgun. Several rounds of 00 buckshot hooked my swamp buggy to the back of my pickup, and with Mike, my faithful dog, headed north to Whiteface Reservoir. passing Ranter's resort.
A dog named Mike is probably the most unbelievable part about this whole story. Who the hell names their dog Mike?
Proceeded to the east side of the lake after the bug was unhooked and the chains installed on the huge DC-3 aircraft tires. I headed down the old logging trail, looking for the area where we had parked our truck during the hunting season. Mike was trembling with anticipation, and I was shaking with fear.
Yeah, well, Tsunami, they didn't have that stuff back in the 60s when this guy was supposedly going through this. Early 60s. He had a compass. He did have a compass with him. Apparently it didn't work, in his story anyway. But yeah, if I went back out, I'd definitely go out with a compass and some torches, and I would probably be armed to the teeth too.
Sap could be disastrous. It seemed doubtful that any other human would enter this.
Yeah, but if you're when I was researching this, I was reading stuff while I was listening to this, so I only half heard who Mike was, and for a long time I thought Mike was this buddy that he went back out with until he gets to the part where he talks about Mike licking his face, and I was like, wait a minute.
Portion of the woods for the rest of the winter. I was also aware of the possibility of encountering one or more of the things, and not knowing what to expect created a fear that almost caused me to turn back. The bug ran beautifully.
I'm the bride of Mothman, native atheist. I am the bride of Mothman.
As I inched through the soft snow, so I turned my attention to searching for a familiar landmark. After making several lucky guesses at Y's in the trail, I suddenly recognized the small clearing where the truck had been parked. Again, almost uncontrollable fear gripped me as I parked the bug. My heart raced wildly as I pulled my shotgun from the rack and headed for my old stand overlooking the swamp. The old trail that had been taken by the wounded doe was covered with snow, so I inched in a general direction toward the scene. It was difficult to walk, as small logs covered with snow acted.
When it comes to the flat earth, I guess they think that compasses always point towards the middle. I don't know. Mike, keep your tongue to yourself. What? Oh, Mike, yeah, because I thought Mike was his buddy.
As built-in obstacles. I was constantly on the alert for tracks in the melting snow. Once I fell across a snow-covered log and remained there to rest for a few minutes. Mike, working in his usual circle, jumped a browsing deer that came crashing through the thicket. My heart leaped into my throat. I called softly to Mike. He returned, trying to lick my face. As
right there,
that's the fear from my body.
That's where I was like, wait a minute, Mike's must be a dog. Because I was reading here. I'll show you. I was reading this. Darren Naish is right up on it, and we're gonna look through some of this after we're done with the video. But in the meantime, I was reading this stuff, and then it got to that part, and I'm like, what the hell's Mike licking his face for?
Mike,
what a freak.
We'll be lucky to get back to the bug, I said softly. Let's get out of here. It was almost 2 o'clock when I started to retrace my tracks in the snow. I wanted to get out of this devil swamp and back to civilization. My legs moved faster and faster as I swore to never set foot in the swamp again. I tripped over a large snow-covered log. When I tried to get up, horror flashed over me. I had fallen directly on top of a frozen, human-like form. I was ready to run when Mike started to dig at the body under the snow. I realized then that the events of that horrible day...
Good thing it was Mike and not somebody else who started digging at the body in the snow. Because if it's season, because you said you were out hunting, presuming you weren't out poaching, it's the season, and this is public land, public hunting land. You're lucky you're the one who found it.
A month earlier had been real. I staggered to my feet, called Mike to my side, and spent several minutes staring at the huge, hairy body. Finally, I brushed the snow away from the head and noticed that one eye seemed to be completely missing. But there was so much frozen blood, it was impossible to tell for sure. The face was not covered with hair, but the neck, shoulders, and stomach were caked with frozen blood. The creature's left arm was twisted under the body, but I compared the right hand with my own. This hand appeared identical to mine, except it was twice as large. As I was inspecting the creature, my fear suddenly vanished.
I guarantee, Tsunami, that Mike was a good boy. I've never met a dog that wasn't a good boy or a good girl. And I'm assuming Mike's a good boy based on his name. I'm not trying to be presumptuous, but usually Mike's a boy name. Unless they're German, and it could be Mika.
I was now convinced I had not killed a true human being, but something similar to man, perhaps some freak of nature. Maybe it wore a mutant of some type. I examined the poor creature and realized it was in a perfect state of preservation. I also noticed that the dead deer had been completely devoured by predators. Why hadn't these predatory animals eaten the flesh of the hairy thing? There was indeed...
Because deer are delicious, and your ape man didn't exist. So, mystery solved.
The mystery surrounding this freak. I decided that the creature should not be left in the swamp. I was
What a judgmental ass, this freak.
still concerned with the scandal that could jeopardize my retirement from the Air Force. It was impossible to dig a grave in the frozen earth. If the creature was left in the swamp, a wandering hunter might stumble over the body in the spring. An investigation by law officers might lead the authorities to me. There was only one thing to do. I left the swamp buggy concealed in the woods and went back to Duluth with my pickup.
On disc magnets placed not in the center or on the edge will point upward at an angle at those two straight up. I'm not sure I follow, Brian. Can you reword that for me, or I'm not sure.
Told my wife that the bug had become stuck and I had to have a pick, shovel, axe, and chainsaw. I returned to the swamp the following day and inched the bug back into the brush, cutting a trail as I went. Using an ice chisel from the truck, I chopped the creature's body from the frozen earth. Loading that hulk onto the rear platform of my swamp buggy was one of the most difficult experiences of my life. The body was rough, dead weight, and was frozen solid. Finally, the icy form was laid out on the platform, and I snugged it down with cargo straps that were standard equipment in the bug. When I reached the pickup, I struggled to transfer the monstrous form to the truck bed. Again, the nylon...
This is the point at which you should call the police. My dude. Right now, or the animal control people or something say, this bear came charging at me and I thought it was a bear, but I went back to get it and it doesn't look a bear. Something like that. At this point, this is why but it's Frank Hansen again. You can't believe anything he says.
On straps were indispensable. It was after dark when I pulled up to my home in the suburban military housing area of Duluth. My wife, Irene, was almost hysterical when she saw the gigantic corpse. I was now beginning to accept the creature, and finally, I convinced her of the seriousness of my experience.
It was gigantic, but not delicious. Apparently, Neanderthal flesh is not scrumptious.
What do you plan to do with the thing? She asked, fearfully staring at the ape-like form. I can't dig a grave. The ground is frozen solid, I explained. Maybe we can keep it in the freezer until spring. We had just purchased a large food freezer 2 weeks earlier. But the freezer is full of meat, Irene protested. Then we'll have to give the meat away, I answered. My retirement is more important than a few dollars worth of meat. She finally agreed to my plan. Like many military wives, she was accustomed to adjusting to unforeseen and unpredictable circumstances. We put our 3 children...
Especially if it's buried, that's indicative of either something foul or you're disturbing the archaeological site. And either one needs to be dealt with by DePopo. Yeah. You're just making more trouble for yourself. There's no situation where you explain this story to someone where you haven't broken hunting laws at this point. And possibly criminal law. If they determine that this is a person, right? That these were maybe a homeless family living in the woods that you open fire on. It's not gonna be good that you didn't call the cops and that you took it home and put it in your freezer. That's like some true crime shit right there.
Into bed, waited until they were asleep,
Morning, Al.
and then with the use of the straps, dragged the carcass of the creature into the basement. We'd better keep the thing covered, Irene said as she went upstairs for an old army blanket. I'll keep the kids out of the basement and clean out the freezer. When I returned home after duty on Monday, I discovered my wife had cleaned out the freezer as she had promised. However, she was almost hysterical over the thought of having that horrible thing in the basement. I don't know what it is, she confided, but it smells terrible, and the odor is all over the house. Despite the stench, we entered the basement and bent the creature's arms and legs.
Hello, delicious Danish. Good to see ya. They're cramming a body in a freezer. It doesn't sound like it's particularly big, though. I mean, it is big, but not like... I mean, that's not a descriptor that they keep dropping about it. It's always like 9 feet tall or something like that. It sounds like it was pretty human-sized.
So that it would fit into the freezer. Either the body was still frozen or rigor mortis had set in. It was an extremely difficult task, and we both breathed easier when the creature was completely in and the top securely fastened. We washed our hands several times and placed our clothes in the washer to soak. Later that night, we opened the basement windows for a thorough airing. Let's not tell a single person about this, I cautioned my wife. We'll just leave it there until spring. The creature remained in our freezer.
Tell a single person about it, but you open your windows up so everybody in the neighborhood can smell it.
For almost a month. Then my curiosity drew me into the basement. Man or animal? A mutant human or a cross between the ape and man family? There were 100 different explanations. I opened the freezer and discovered the creature's body was dehydrating. Certain parts of the body looked like a piece of dried up meat. I went back upstairs and told Irene of the dilemma. If we bury it in the spring, it won't make any difference, I said. But if we learn what it is and decide to keep it, then it should be properly...
Why would you decide to keep it? No matter the situation, at this point, you have no choice. Like if you're wanting to avoid legal trouble, right? You have no choice but to report it now and just act stupid about someone from the games department needs to come check out this bear I shot or something dumb like that. Like that you were just dumb and we were so dumb that you really thought this had to be a bear. Or to bury it and forget about it. Those are your options at this point. Going on the carnival tour with it, but we'll get there.
I don't know how to keep it from drying out. My wife thought a moment. Remember those Canadian lake trout that we kept for 2 years? We froze them in ice water and they stayed fresh. Perhaps the thing could be preserved that way. It's worth a try. We started by pouring 20 gallons of ice water into the freezer each day. The job was completed within a weekend, and our incredible secret was now encased in a solid block of ice, safe from prying eyes and freezer burn. To make certain that no one could open the freezer, the door wall locked.
It's not really safe from freezer burn, though, is it?
And I kept the only key. When the spring thaw arrived, I was faced with another dilemma. It would require several days to melt the ice around the creature's body, and in the process, the basement of our home would be filled with an odorous stench. I was also concerned about the danger of burying the thing. A passerby might see me digging a grave and alert the police. Transporting the body from my home to a gravesite.
Did something happen to your wrench, sweetie? I don't remember ever removing a wrench, but maybe you're on a different account. I know you've had a wrench. Yeah, we'll go. There. I don't know. I thought you had a wrench.
Was equally dangerous. Danish. I envisioned a traffic accident, with the smelly creature tossed out on the pavement and a police officer staring at me as I fumbled for some rational explanation. My wife was now accustomed to having the creature in the freezer, so I decided to leave it in the basement and not press our luck. In the summer of 1961, we purchased a farm near Rolling Stone, Minnesota, in preparation for my retirement.
So, homie's like, well, I can't bury it now. He brought it home. He's like, I got to bury this. And he got it home, and then he gets to the spring thaw, and he's like, oh, no, I can't bury this. My neighbors might see. So, what was the initial plan in the first place? I have too much cookie dough in my freezer for frozen monkey man meat. Yeah. They didn't wonder why there was a freaking chimp buried in the snow in North America. Right? Or that there was like chimps just eating a person or whatever. Or even Neanderthals, which is what he tried to sell this as. My wife is now accustomed to my harebrained dumbassery.
We agreed that the family would move to the farm at that time, and I would commute on weekends. I could not risk allowing a moving company to transfer our freezer, so I rented a U-Haul truck and moved all of our furniture by myself. Friends helped skid the heavy meat-packed freezer out of the basement and into the truck. A couple of fellows asked why I didn't remove the meat first, but I explained that I wanted to keep it cold inside for the long trip to the farm. Besides, I couldn't seem to locate the key in all the confusion.
I can understand bringing home moose meat or something, but it's a freaking chimpanzee. But the guy sounds like brainworms keeping roadkill in his freezer. Yeah, it's not a smart choice.
Of moving. The trip from Duluth to Rolling Stone took 7 hours, and the top layer of ice had started to melt. Friends and relatives again assisted in unloading.
Now he's taking this thing on a road trip from Duluth to Rolling Stone, which is... Do I still have the map up? Yeah. Rolling Stone's way the hell down here in southern Minnesota. Let's see. Not that it matters. Not where Rolling Stone is really. That it really matters, but it's right there. So it is quite the trip from there to there. It's about a 7-hour trip with a dead monkey man in a freezer, pulling it across country. I've never driven cross country with a dead body. Fortunately, I've always had the proper disposal methods at hand. So,
the furniture and skidding the heavy freezer into the basement. I breathed easier when it was safely situated in the utility room of our remote farm home. I could not get by until retirement without fear of exposure. I was concerned that a power failure might occur, so I purchased a standby generator to cope
homie's like, I'm going to keep this monkey man in my freezer until I retire. This monkey man's my retirement plan.
such an emergency. It was also gratifying to know that it could now be buried at any time in our back 40 without fear of being seen. In November 1965, I retired from the Air Force after completing 20 years of active service. I joined my family at the farm and quickly became disillusioned with the inactivity of life. I now had plenty of opportunity to read, and for the first time became acquainted with the many stories and legends about the so-called abominable snowman. The more articles I read, the more certain I became that the thing in our freezer was a type of snowman. I now began to make discreet inquiries about the statute of limitations on murder.
If you're eating or even handling a raw macaque, there's a risk of herpes B virus, encephalitis, which has an 80% fatality rate. Everyone should drive cross-country with 100 pounds of frozen meat at least once. It's a solid life experience. May I post a link to my new channel? Yes, you can, sweetie. Post your link. Explain why Mrs. Peacock was murdering people.
And learned that there was no time limit in the state of Minnesota. Because of this, the decision was made to just...
Homie was really expecting there to be a statute of limitations on fucking murder? Is that what he just... what we just heard?
That there was no time... I now began to make discreet inquiries about the statute of limitations on murder and learned that there was no time limit in the state of Minnesota. Because of this,
dude, yeah, there's no statute of limitations on murder. It goes on beyond your mortal life. You can still be found guilty of murder long after you've died.
To just sit tight with our specimens safely in the freezer for a while longer. In December 1966, I happened to meet a veteran showman who quickly recognized my boredom with civilian life and suggested that I become a full-time showman by exhibiting a rare old John Deere tractor that I had acquired and loaned to the Smithsonian Institution. It had been returned to me from Washington, and I was showing it on a highly selective basis. Take your tractor...
That definitely counts, Brian Stevens.
...on a full-time circuit...
That's meat.
...of major fairs. You won't get...
There's a statute of limitations on murder in some countries. That's crazy. You'll have to elaborate on that for me. So what, he had to move to Texas or something? I thought you were talking about me, because, yeah, I had to move to Texas. Temporarily.
Rich, but you'll have fun and discover a whole new world out there, he said. Suddenly, a thought dawned on me. Would some sort of a frozen hairy creature, resembling a prehistoric man, make a good attraction? The showman almost choked. It's a great idea, but where would you ever get a specimen like that? Perhaps I could get one made, I said, not being able to divulge my secret. I returned home with only one thought in mind and immediately consulted with my attorney concerning the legalities of exhibiting the creature. He listened with amusement until I drove him to my farm and opened the freezer. He stared down into the cloudy ice with horrified fascination. Later, we discussed the legal aspects. There's always the possibility of a murder charge if this thing is judged to be human, he informed.
That's kind of... Ember says, although some judges have dismissed very old murder cases on the opinion the delay amounts to a violation of the defendant's rights to a speedy trial. Look, police officers, it took you too long to catch me, which means I'm denied my rights to a speedy trial, and I want this case dismissed. And the judge is like, that makes sense to me. That's wild. That is wild. Holy shit, Germany had a statute of limitations until 1979. They had to pass it because Nazis were escaping prosecution. Yeah, that's messed up. That's why there shouldn't be a statute of limitations on murder. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. Indeed it is.
Then are also laws concerning the transportation of dead bodies.
Morning,
I can see
trees.
all sorts of legal difficulties. I'm convinced the creature would make a great exhibit, I said. Isn't there any way to do it by creating a model? He lit another cigarette and thought a moment. You have the original body. The authorities will be after it, because this thing is the scientific find of the century. However, it might be possible to create a model as you suggested. Maintain...
Oh, I'm getting accused now. Bree moved to Texas so she could hide her frozen Mothman. Mothman sightings are down now. Coincidence? I think not. I wouldn't freeze Mothman. but he may or may not be down in our dungeon. Yeah, because we have a dungeon.
In a record of the model's construction, but show the real creature instead. If the officials pressure you, it's a small matter to produce photos of the model taken during different phases of fabrication. Better than that, I replied. I'll even exhibit the model for the first year so that it will be accepted by carnies as a bogus show. In January 1967, I made sketches of the real creature and went to Hollywood to confer with the men who make models for the motion picture industry. I talked with Bud Westmore, the director of makeup at Universal Studios. He informed me,
Yes, I am the Moth Woman, the bride of Mothman, the Moth Queen. I mean, other shit has been weird in Illinois since then, though. Yeah, well, you know, when I leave, then all the cool stuff happens, right? Someone in my hometown stole a FedEx truck and went on a low-speed chase, and every cop in every town with 30 miles around was wanting to take part in this chase. It was wild. Happened like just weeks after I left. But apparently, the Valentina Gomez, the crazy Missouri candidate person, she's down in Texas now too. She followed me down here.
that such a model might cost up to $20,000. Westmore didn't have the time to make the creation, but he agreed to offer his technical knowledge if I needed it. He also agreed that it would be a challenging endeavor.
That's the thing. This is where it gets convoluted, okay? He had a real hairy monster man, which he wanted to take on display, but was worried about the legal repercussions, so he had a model made that he took on display. But then he took the real thing on display when some people looked at it, and the model when other people looked at it. It just gets really convoluted from here.
I then consulted with a staff member of the Los Angeles County Museum. He suggested that I contact Howard Ball, an independent artist who was creating life-size fiberglass elephants to be displayed at the La Brea tar pits. I later engaged Ball to sculpture the carcass and mold the body. John Chambers, a makeup artist and Academy Award winner from 20th Century Fox, suggested that a small wax studio in Los Angeles could implant the hair according to my specifications. I approached Pete and Betty Corral. They agreed to do the work and implanted each hair individually with an open-end needle. I constantly directed this portion, and their work was magnificent. They were...
Yeah, sounds like he's admitting to having this made by professionals, even naming who built the model. It's so weird that this is still a mystery, because at some point he says, oh yeah, there was a real one too.
great artists and a pleasure to deal with. By the time the model was completed, I had another worry. There was no guarantee that any exhibit would make money on the fair circuit, yet I had spent several $1,000s, some of it borrowed, to obtain the model. Despite my misgivings, I enlisted the aid of a friend in Pasadena, and we added the finishing touches to make it look as close to the specimen in my freezer as possible. The bloody eyes, broken arm, and the blood-soaked hair was carefully duplicated to...
Ooh, we have some more gift memberships. Thank you so much, Dave. Appreciate you. Love you, bud. Who got one? Jen. And Jen is she's a frequent follower of Sasquatch Secrets, so she must have been visiting from Nikki. So hey, Jen, Al Trucker. Oh, okay, that's just a comment, but yeah, I said fiberglass elephant. Let's do a fake of the real fake. I totally ate for supper. Wild World was gifted a membership. That's Tom. Gave us the shout out a couple weeks ago. He just had us 100,000 subscribers. Can you believe that? 100,000 subscribers. Here I am at 1,200 for years. And yeah, amazing work, Tom. Your mom got one. Congratulations, your mom. Ian Chin Official. Caterpillar was gifted a membership. Yay.
match the original. It was now time to freeze the ice around the model, and this presented a few humorous moments. I rented a cold storage room from a large Los Angeles ice company, and at 8 a.m. one sunny morning, pulled in with my monstrous creation in the rear of my station wagon. A stunned executive happened to stroll by and did several double takes. "Where are you going with that thing?" he stammered. "I've rented a storage room for a few days," I explained. "In our company?" He stared at the model and twisted his hands in anguish. "My gosh, was that a living thing? This is a food processing plant. Get that thing out of here before a government inspector sees it." Later, I arranged to ice down the model at a privately owned locker plant that had recently shut down. The final phases of my...
Sounds like he's trying to cover his butt for people catching him, like, building this this hoax.
creation were completed there. I placed the model in a refrigerated coffin, designed especially for the exhibit. This was done with heavy straps and a rented forklift. The coffin was transported in a special show trailer to Los Banos, California, arriving just in time for its debut with the West Coast shows. On the 3rd of May, 1967, the exhibit was opened to the public for the first time as a What Is It type of show. Where did it come from? Curious spectators inquired. It is claimed to have been found by some Chinese fishermen in the Bering Straits, was my stock reply. My cover story had been created in advance and worked very well, so I stuck to it for
Somebody shot it in the face, though, Hansen.
the next 2 years. As I continued along the fair circuit that year, I readily admitted to other showmen that this was a creation. All agreed it was a
I wonder if something didn't happen in the molding process that caused it to have the face deformities. Like, let's just go with it. We'll make it bloody and stuff.
compelling attraction, but the model contained too many imperfections to fool anyone with an expert knowledge of anatomy. Our tour continued until November 1967, when we closed at the Louisiana State Fair and returned to our farm home in Rolling Stone for the winter. By March 1968, I had convinced myself that it was safe to substitute the real specimen for the coming fair season. I cut off refrigeration to melt the ice from both specimens and made the switch using my farm tractor loader and an I-beam.
Why switch it ever? Why ever display the real creature?
I worked the creature into a position closely resembling the model by cutting the
You're making money off the fake one. You don't have to do the real one. There's never a situation where you're going to have to do the real creature.
tendons in the arms and legs. I then started the difficult task of creating ice around the specimen. This will be the greatest exhibit to hit the fair circuit, I said, after the job was completed. Even a trained scientist would be shocked to see this. The 1968 season was one of the most remarkable in our history. Physician,
Weren't you all freaking out about the cops finding out about it? And now you're like, no, and now I want to trick scientists with it and convince them that it's a real person. And then you're like, but I don't want the cops to... Make up your mind, dude. Which direction are you going?
professors, and college students came from everywhere to see the exhibit. All pondered on the possibilities of a true missing link. At the Oklahoma State Fair, one prominent surgeon visited the exhibit on 9 separate occasions. Each time, he brought a different colleague. Even a high official of the
This time with the Mr. Collins, who's the herpetologist who kept revisiting the
state of
Iceman.
Oklahoma tactfully suggested that we were not promoting our exhibit fully by showing it on the fair circuit. At the Kansas State Fair, the county pathologist was so intrigued that he sent many of his associates to see the creature. Apparently, the exhibit was brought to the attention of Ivan Sanderson and Bernard Hoovelmans by one of their colleagues. They called and asked permission to examine the creature. This was a grave mistake on my part. Both men were visibly impressed, but made no mention of releasing a scientific report. However, Dr. Hoovelmans published an article on the Homo pongoides, the ape man, in a February 1969 bulletin.
So you want to be able to trick scientists. You've mentioned that, and then scientists show up. You're like, I want to trick these scientists, and you trick the scientists, and you're like, they wrote a science about it. About that, we tricked them. They wrote a science.
The Royal Institute of Natural Sciences of Belgium. The long search for the rumored live ape man or missing link has at last been successful, he reported. Ivan Sanderson published an article in the May 1969 issue of Argosy magazine. Let me say simply, he wrote that one look was actually enough to convince us that this was, from our point of view at least, the genuine article. This was no phony Chinese trick or artwork. If nothing else confirmed this,
What is with the Chinese trick accusations? It feels like it's like old-timey racism boiled down into
the
that.
appalling stench of rotting flesh exuding from a point in the insulation of the coffin certainly did. My problem started again with the publication of Hoovelman's article. It seemed as if every newspaper, radio station, magazine, and television station in the world wanted to verify the existence of the creature. Calls poured in each day from London, Tokyo, Berlin, Rome, and scores of American cities. The Smithsonian Institution requested permission to inspect the carcass. This request was promptly refused.
Yeah, I bet it was. They didn't want anybody refusing your, or you didn't want anybody examining your creature, but you said, I wanted to be able to trick scientists. You're so contradictory in your goals and ambitions with this. Well, I think it's a hoax, but
Dozens of scientists asked permission to remove a core sample of the creature. Biologists wanted hair and blood samples. Hoovelmans had stated in his article that it appeared
Mark, you are not a bottom enough to make those two hand symbols together.
that the creature had been shot. Newspapers began to speculate on the possibility that law enforcement authorities should investigate the manner in which I obtained the creature. If the body is that of a human being, there is the question of who shot him and whether any crime was committed, an article in the Detroit News reported. With these events swarming into my life, I became a regular visitor to my attorney's office. His advice was clear-cut and direct. Frank, you had better substitute the model for the real specimen and then take off for a long vacation. This sounded like good advice, so I made arrangements to make the transfer in a cold storage warehouse. The original specimen was put into a refrigerated van and sped to a hiding place away from the Midwest.
What? No, how is he? Where's this body gonna go? Okay.
Refreezing the model took several days, and it was during this period that newspapers carried accounts of both me and the creature vanishing. During the past few months, I have been pressed for the conditions or circumstances under which I would consider giving the specimen up for scientific evaluation. 2 conditions must be met before I would even consider such an action. 1. A statement of complete amnesty for any possible violation of federal laws. 2. A statement of complete amnesty for any possible violation of state and local laws where the specimen was transported or exhibited during the 1968 fair season.
Bro's giving ultimatums to the authorities about his monkey man.
There will surely be skeptics that will brand this story a complete fabrication. Possibly it is. I am not under oath, and should the situation dictate, I will deny every word of it. But then no one can be completely certain, unless my conditions of amnesty are met. In the meantime, I will continue to exhibit a hairy specimen that I have publicly acknowledged to be a fabricated illusion, and leave the final judgment to the viewers. If one should detect a rotting odor coming from a corner of the coffin, it is only your imagination. A new seal has been placed under the glass, and the coffin is airtight. As the frozen mystery lay encased in ice, hidden away from the prying eyes of the world, Frank Hansen had no idea just how much chaos it would stir in the years to come. The creature, suspended between life and legend, had become more than just an exhibit. It was a question no one could fully answer. Scientists, showmen...
Actually, we got an answer. He told us about the people he had make it. He just told us about that. The other story was just silliness.
And curious onlookers could only stare and wonder if they were gazing upon something not meant for this world. Whether it was the missing link or an elaborate hoax, one thing was certain. The creature's secret would remain locked away, just out...
Missing link, that's such a silly concept. There's no missing link. Every generation is a new divergence from the previous generation, and the evolution is the slow process. You wouldn't even notice it. There's not going to be a link where there's all of a sudden a monkey man ancestor. It's just going to go slowly back. You won't even notice the change until now all of a sudden you're looking at a monkey.
Out of reach. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the unknown. This is Remote Cabin Radio, where history and mystery come alive. Good night.
All right. So... let's see. Now, like I said, Darren Naish wrote up an article on this. This is Tetzu. This is his blog. This has been a couple years back, but here's Hoovelman's sketches of the body, right? There's a couple books that talk about it. And here's the full body sketch. Get a good look at it. The Minnesota Iceman as it looked when frozen and as it was interpreted by Hoovelman and Sanderson. There's Frank right there. Looks like a used car salesman with his Iceman. Frozen in its cooler. Casket. Sanderson and Hoovelman examined the Iceman in December of 1968 at Hansen's home, where it was being stored off-show for the winter. Both became convinced of its reality, so much so that they prepared detailed illustrations and planned to have the creature described in technical literature. The body was that of a robust, barrel-chested male with a thick neck and large hands and feet. His face was broad, flattened, and possessed a short, upturned nose and prominent brow ridge. An eyeball dangling out of one socket, apparently resulting from a gunshot to the back of the head. That's the thing about his story, too. He's like, oh, yeah, it was charging me and I shot it. You shot it in the back of the head, dude. You shot it in the back of the head. And a bend in the forearm was interpreted as evidence of a fractured radius and ulna. Sanderson and Hoovelman were intrigued by its enormous hands. The thumb was slender, tapering, and long. Its nails were flat, yellow, and of the appearance that almost looked manicured. And the heel pad was presented on the palms on the palm's outer side. Yeah, okay. And features suggested by Sanderson to be indicative of habitual quadrupedal behavior. At one point during the examination, the glass over the case cracked, releasing an odor described as that of decomposing flesh. So they broke the glass while they were examining it. There's the images that they drew with all the dimensions and stuff. As you can see, it wasn't like huge like you generally think of a Sasquatch. This object has been known ever since as the Minnesota Iceman. Sanderson and Hoovelman both spoke about it in the media. Sanderson making the unfortunate decision to refer to it as Bozo. This seems oddly helpful given the apparent belief that it was real. Hoovelman published in a 1969 paper on it in the Belgian scientific journal, identifying it as a new species of human genus that he named Homo pongoides, which means ape-like man. He later modified this proposal, arguing that H. pongoides was a form of living Neanderthal. His ideas were explored in detail in his 1974 book, which I'm not going to try to pronounce the name there, co-authored by Russian historian, economist, and crypto-hominid expert Boris Porchnev. John Napier, a primatologist at the Smithsonian Institution, was with a serious interest in crypto-hominids, was invited to examine the Iceman. He became sure that it was a latex model. Hansen's dodge for this was that he had withdrawn the original genuine specimen from display, mostly for fear of being found guilty for killing what might have been a form of human and replacing it with a model. So yeah, there we go. There's a fairground version of a abominable snowman and Iceman on display. The skeptical view of the Minnesota Iceman has always been that it was a hoax, the latest in a long tradition of displaying enigmatic, memorable sideshow exhibits that are implied to be real. In 2013, what appears to be the original genuine article was offered for sale online. Today, the Minnesota Iceman is owned by Steve Busty of the Museum of the Weird in Austin, Texas, and certainly looks identical to the specimen discussed and illustrated by Hoovelman and Sanderson. Its hoaxed nature doesn't exactly leave Hoovelman and Sanderson looking all that credible as scientists. What makes the Minnesota Iceman case especially interesting within the context of cryptozoology as a whole is how it was interpreted by supporters of its reality. Thanks to Hoovelman's influence, the concept of a dark-furred Asian crypto-hominid with an upturned nose, distinct facial and hand and foot anatomy, and barrel-shaped chest has caught on. Crypto-hominid researcher Helmut Wisowa argued in 1994 that images from ancient art were consistent with descriptions and hence the knowledge of Homo pongoides has been influential throughout human history. Homo pongoides is not a real thing. We're just going to stop right there. But of course, whenever we search in the world, there are legends and stories and often claimed sightings of wild, hairy people. So it isn't surprising that various semi-legendary Asian creatures were linked to this concept and suggested as possible representatives of the same sort of animal. A large number of wild men reports collected from the Caucasus region, the Caucasus, I guess I was going to say, the Caucasus in the west of Mongolia, in the east by crypto-hominid researcher Boris Porchnev, Dmitry Bayanov, and Marie-Jean Kaufman, it might be, have been said to be uncannily similar to Homo pongoides in anatomy and therefore interpreted as sightings of the exact same species. In addition, more than 20 reports collected in northern Pakistan by the late herpetologist Jordi Magraner, and pertaining to the wild man known as the Bar Manu, have been regarded as descriptions of Homo pongoides. The witnesses again reporting a long list of features regarded as consistent with the creature's appearance. So yeah, like that. Big feet doesn't match up with the rest of the anatomy. When people talk about barrel-chested, thick-necked hominids, I feel called out. You are a hominid. That's true. You might not be hairy enough. Caucasoids? Don't use that word. No. Mag Rayner, why is it always herpetologist? That's so weird. It's like herpetologists study Bigfoot. Why? Mag Rayner's investigation and analysis have been regarded as a great triumph of the cryptozoological method and as a demonstration of the fact that Homo pongoides and the Minnesota Iceman are valid biological entities. Similarly, Loof's Wisowa idea about hominids of this sort being depicted in art have been regarded as providing support for the existence of this creature. But the Iceman was a model, and thus the species and the traits associated with it evaporate as anything meaningful in biological terms. Where does this leave all the reports that match the description? We have concluded that everything written about pongoides, like hominids encounters in the ancient arts and real life, is erroneous, that people were picking and choosing those features that matched the pongoides concept and being led astray by a mistaken assumption that it was a real animal. And that's where we'll end things for now. But this is only an introduction, yeah. So that is the Minnesota Iceman for you. I don't know if you'd heard of it before now, but now you do. Now you do. So to all my hairy hominids and stuff out there, thank you for sticking with me. Let us know in the comments below. Did you believe in the Minnesota Iceman? Have you ever seen the Minnesota Iceman? There's probably people that are still alive who went to the carnival in the 60s and saw it as kids. Let me know in the comments down below. Please remember to be kind. Take care, and we will see you next time.